So this is the lesson for 3-10, day one. All right. What we're doing today is solving systems of equations algebraically, but we're using something called the elimination method. All right. Think about what the word elimination means, the word eliminate. To eliminate means that you get rid of something. All right. In our terms, the eliminate is going to mean that a total letter, all right, either your X or your Y or whatever letter you're using in the question, is going to totally disappear. We're going to eliminate it because it's going to cancel out. And the way that we're going to do that is by adding the equations together. What you're going to do, the very first step, is that you are going to add the equations going down. The next thing that we're going to do is you're going to be left with an equation. We're going to solve that for whatever variable you have. All right. Sometimes it's X, sometimes it's Y. It all depends on the individual problem that you're looking at. The next thing that you're going to do is take that answer from step number 2 and sub it back into an original equation. You have your choice what equation you want to sub it back into. Whichever equation looks easier to you, that's the one that you should sub it back into. By easier, I like working with positive numbers and adding signs rather than looking at negative numbers and subtracting signs. So I tend to sub it into like an adding equation. All right, just the personal preference there. The other thing, then you're going to take that answer once you find that answer, and you're going to solve for the other variable. All right. Then you're going to do a check. You're going to check your answers in both equations to make sure that they are correct. So what your questions look like here, all right, in step number 1, what you're being given is that you are being given 2 equations, just like we had before. Now, in previous sections, what we did was 2 days ago, we graphed the 2 equations and we saw where they crossed, and that was our answer. Yesterday, you rearranged the 2 equations, set them equal to each other, and solved. This is a third different method for solving systems of equations. So what we want to do here is notice that we have opposites right here as our x's. All right. We can only use this method when we have opposites. So think of what opposites mean. Opposites mean like 5 and -5, or 3 and -3, or 7 and -7. Notice that in this problem, we have opposites of 2x and -2x. So because we have these opposites, that is the only reason that we can use this method that we're using. If you don't have opposites, you can't do it. All right. So the first step said that we want to add the equations together. We want to add going down. All right. We want to add our equations together going down. So in our first step, we're going to add going down. When we go and add going down, all right, 2x plus -2x, those just cancel out. All right, 2x plus -2x is just 0. We're not going to write 0x though. Those just cancel out. Remember that this is called the elimination method. So we just eliminated the x's. Now we're going to add going down here with our y's to our y's. 7y plus 3y is 10y. Bring down our equal sign. 18 plus 2 is 20. Our next step says to solve this equation. So when we go to solve this equation, this is just a one-step equation. We're going to divide by 10 and divide by 10. So we end up getting y equals 2. That is one of our answers. And yes, that's how easy it is. All right. That is one of our answers. But now you have your choice. All right. You have your choice as to what equation you want to sub this answer into. We could take this 2 and we can either sub it into here or here for y. Now, when I take a look at those 2 equations, I have all positive numbers in the top. I do have a -2 here, but they look like they're smaller numbers. These two equations are pretty much about equally as difficult to sub into. I'm going to take the smaller numbers. I tend to like smaller numbers better. So we have -2x plus 3y equals 2. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 2 and sub it in for y. So I'm going to have -2x plus, instead of 3 times y, I have 3 times 2 equals 2. Now you're going to solve this equation. Well, the first thing that we need to do to solve this equation is multiply the 3 times 2 together. So I have -2x plus 6, because that was a positive 6, equals 2. This is just a two-step equation now. -6 minus 6. So -2x equals -4. Divide by -2, divide by -2, and we get an answer of x equals 2. Now, one of the things that you might be thinking, are x and y always going to be the same answer? Because we got x equals 2 and we got y equals 2. No, that's just a coincidence, all right? They're not always going to be the same answer. The last step is you can always check your answers. Now remember, just like in the previous couple days on the Regents exam, they might make you write your answer as a coordinate, as x comma y. You want to be able to check your answers to make sure that you got it right. Well, the way that you're going to check your answer is you are going to take each equation and sub in your two answers for x and y. So in this first equation, we have 2x plus 7y equals 18. I'm going to take and sub in my 2 and my 2 as my answers. So instead of 2 times x, I have 2 times 2. Instead of 7 times y, I have 7 times 2 equals 18. Go and do that calculation. So 2 times 2 is 4. 7 times 2 is 14. We end up with 18 equals 18. So it checked in that top equation. Now we're going to check it in our bottom equation. -2x plus 3y equals 2. When we go to check it in this one, we're subbing in our 2 and our 2. So -2 times 2 instead of -2 times x. 3 times 2 instead of 3 times y equals 2. -2 times 2 is -4. 3 times 2 is 6. -4 plus 6 is 2. So 2 equals 2. It checks. If your answers check in both equations, you know 100% sure that your answer of 2 comma 2, x equals 2 and y equals 2 is correct. If you get different answers on the sides of the equal sign, then your answer is wrong somewhere. This is the only way that you could figure out if your answer is correct or not, by doing a check, all right? Whether you do the check or not, that's up to you. I would personally do that, especially on the quiz, all right? Taking a look at the next one. So in this next one, you have opposites here, this time with your y's. Notice that we have a -5y and we have a positive 5y. So those are your opposites in this question. Your first step is to add going down. So when we add going down, we have 2x plus 3x. 2x plus 3x is 5x. When we add going down, those cancel out. That's why it's called the elimination method. We eliminated the y's. Bring down your equal sign. -9 plus 24. -9 plus 24 is 15. Now you just have a one-step equation. So the next step in our problem says solve for x. So solve that equation. So we get x equals 3. That's one of our answers. X equals 3. Now what we're going to do is take that 3 and you have your choice. We can take that 3 and either sub it into here or here for x. whichever equation looks easier to you. Now, again, I like to avoid minus signs and negative signs. I'm going to sub it into that bottom equation. But again, if you wanted to sub it into that top equation, you could. So I'm going to sub it into 3x plus 5y equals 24. So I'm going to take this 3 and I'm subbing it in for x. So instead of 3 times x, I have 3 times 3 plus 5y equals 24. Now you're going to solve that equation. 3 times 3 is 9. Now you just have a two-step equation. Trying to get the 5y all by itself, you're going to do minus 9 minus 9. So 5y equals 15. Divide by 5, divide by 5, you get an answer of y equals 3. Again, it just happens to be a coincidence that we have x and y being the same answer. That happens sometimes. Does it happen all the time? No. Will it happen in our next question? No. All right. If you wanted to check your answer, all right, if we wanted to check our answer, we're checking the answer 3, 3, where x equals 3 and y equals 3. Subbing it into our first equation, instead of 2 times x, we would have 2 times 3. Instead of 5 times y, we have 5 times 3 equals negative 9. 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 3 is 15. 6 minus 15 is negative 9. That happens to be what is on the other side as well. So we know that our answer is correct. Looking in the other equation, we have, instead of 3 times x, we have 3 times 3. Instead of 5 times y, we have 5 times 3. And that has to equal 24. So 3 times 3 is 9. 5 times 3 is 15. 9 plus 15 is 24. So we get 24 equals 24. It checks. Remember that it has to check in both equations, both the top equation and the bottom equation, so that you know if it's right. If it only checks in one equation, it's wrong. All right, it has to check in both. Take a look at this next one. Take a look at this next one, please. If you could try this one on your own, please. All right, try this one on your own. One little piece of advice: anytime that you have a letter that's all by itself, like this X at the beginning, remember that there is really a 1 in front of it. Go ahead and try this one, please. Find both X and Y. Go ahead and try this one. So when we take a look at this one, you have opposites right here with your y's, because you have a positive 2y and a negative 2y. Your first step in all of these questions today is to add going down. 4x plus 1x is 5x. When you add going down, those y's cancel out. Bring down your equal sign. 12 plus 13 is 25. Our next step says to solve that equation. So it's just a one-step equation. Divide by 5, divide by 5. You get x equals 5. Now you have your choice. You can take this x of being 5 and either sub it into here or here. I personally like the bottom equation better just because it has a 1x. But if you wanted to sub it into the top one, you're going to have different work, but the same answer. So I'm going to sub it into this bottom one. So where I have x minus 2y equals 13, all I'm going to do is take my 5 and sub it in for x. So instead of x minus 2y, I'm going to have 5 minus 2y equals 13. Solving that equation, I'm going to do minus 5 minus 5. So I get negative 2y equals 8. Divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. And we get x equals negative 4 as our answer. So sorry, this is y. Y equals negative 4. So now that we have x equals 5 and y equals negative 4, if you wanted to check your answer, you could. We'd be checking 5 comma negative 4. And we would have to sub it in. So instead of 4 times x, you would have 4 times 5. Instead of 2 times y, we'd have 2 times negative 4 equals 12. 4 times 5 is 20. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. We're adding these together. So this would be a positive 12. So we have 12 equals 12. That checks. For the other side, we would have x, which is just 5, minus 2 times negative 4 equals 13. Negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. So we have 5 plus 8. 5 plus 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. So 13 equals 13. It checks. Our answer checked in both problems, so we know that it is correct. Be very, very careful of the order of your variables. I don't believe that there's any on the homework like this, but be very careful. If there was, you have to be very careful. Notice that it goes x, y equals a number, but this one goes y, x equals a number. Sometimes on the Regents exam, they try and trick you, all right? You would need them in the correct order. So you can take and switch things around as long as you move the sign that's in front of it with it. So we can move the sign in front of this negative 2x over to here. And so we can just rewrite the problem so that it looks like this, all right? In this question, you would have to take and add going down as your first step. When we would add going down in the first step, those would cancel out. And we would have 7y equals 15 when we add going down. And then you would solve it from there. We're not actually going to do that one. I just wanted to warn you about the order of the questions. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to add going down, solve for your letter. Once you solve for your letter, you do have your choice, sub it back in, solve for the other letter. All right, that's what you need to do in all of these questions.